with.
My name's Gillian, and I had a friend, a very close and dear friend who was elderly, and she had to go into a nursing home. And my experience of having a very dear friend in a nursing home was really quite traumatic. She went in, and at that time she was mobile, so things weren't too bad, and there were very nice nursing staff, and for a few months all seemed to be going very, very well, and she was getting better. Then the management of the entire company changed. So the company was taken over, including that nursing home, by another company. Sadly, some of the older nurses, who were really well qualified and were very fond of my friend, they left one by one, and gradually the whole staff changed. Also, the standard of care changed. That seemed to change for everyone on the floor that my friend was on. There were about 28 residents on that floor, quite a few of them very poorly, including my friend. I used to go to the relatives meetings, which happened twice a year, and it was a very sort of smart occasion with wine and sandwiches, and then the manager and the matron and somebody from the head office would come, and they would talk about the home and the future of the home. And then we were asked if we'd like, to make any sort of contributions and speak. And I remember clearly one of the relatives getting up and saying that she was very concerned about her mother constantly being found in the bed wet. She was always wet in the mornings when her daughter went in. And then somebody else tried to say something, and immediately we were told, no, that's not the sort of thing you raise at a relatives meeting. You actually come to the office. So I didn't really know too much more what was going on with the other relatives. However, things did get worse for my friend. She started to be totally incapable of moving about or going to the lavatory herself, and so she would ring the bell. She would wait sometimes 20 minutes, half an hour, in tremendous discomfort, and then she'd have an accident and feel really bad and upset. And one day she said to me, I had awful diarrhoea the other day, and I was left sitting in it for over half an hour. Now, I actually found that in the nursing notes, how upset she was and that she'd complained. Well, I went and complained over and over about the bell waits. Nothing ever improved. I actually had the courage to raise this matter at a relatives meeting, and several other people raised it. Oh yes, it would be addressed, it would be addressed. This went on for 2 years. Also, you could never get any information from the home after 5 o'clock. If you rang to see how your friend or relative was, there was never any answer. Then I had a phone put in for my friend by her bed so she could ring me. And in the last year of her life, she phoned me 3 times, late at night, saying that she hadn't been put to bed and that she was frightened. At one point, she was actually sitting by her French window with the door open, and it was 9 o'clock at night. And she said she was cold, that she was hungry, she was frightened, that other bells were ringing, and no one seemed to be there. And she said, has there been some terrible accident? So I got in the car and I went over, and I got in because I knew the code to get in. And someone came up to me and said, oh, some of the staff arrived late. That was what I was told. This was a nurse I'd never seen before. So the next day I went to the manager and said, I'm terribly worried. My friend wasn't put to bed. And she said, I'll find out why. It was an agency nurse. I went at least for 3 weeks to that office saying, why wasn't she put to bed? Well, they were very sorry, it wouldn't happen again, but they never contacted the agency, and there was no explanation why there was no one else to put her to bed. So things got worse. Now that happened 2 more times. Not only were there the bell waits, my friend had a very bad hand. She couldn't open it, it was contracted. And the nails grew very, very long. Nobody ever did anything about her hands. And I used to do it. And she was in agony, but I used to try and clip them and clean the hand because it was very, very bad. So that went on as well. And if her excellent carer was away for a fortnight's holiday, then she'd be desperate because he was very good and would try to help. And the carers were very good, but there simply weren't enough of them. There was a tremendous shortage of staff. And the nurse in the nursing station always seemed to be writing notes or doing the medication. So there wasn't really no care at all. When she was well enough to come here, I'd bring her in the wheelchair to my own home, and then I'd take her back in the evening. And very often I had to put her to bed myself because they were too busy. There was no one to help. She did tell me something quite awful. She told me that one morning at about 6, the bedclothes had been pulled off her and she was wearing an incontinence pad, and that had been just pulled away. Nobody had spoken to her or woken her up, nothing. That was what was done. I have to say, in between all of this, as I say, there were good carers, and when the good carer was on, things would improve for her. She became very ill, and there was one wheelchair commode being shared between several residents on that floor. I kept asking for a wheelchair commode for her because she couldn't wait. And I was told that we could order one and that we would have to pay. So I said, we'll order one, get the most comfortable, and then we got the bill, and we did send the bill back to the manufacturer. I thought it was absolutely disgraceful because as one person used the commode, that had to be cleaned, disinfected before the next person could get it. She had her own wheelchair because the wheelchairs were so dreadful. We bought the wheelchair, and we had to sell the flat that she lived in to pay for her fees eventually because the fees were very expensive. And one day she turned to me and she said, "What am I paying all this money for?" There was no pressure cushion for her to sit on. Nothing was supplied. And she was always saying how numb she was getting and how she couldn't be moved. And she got so heavy I couldn't move her all the time. And she was left sitting for hours in the chair. And then to get her back to bed I had to get help. Well, you could wait again, 20 minutes, half an hour. And then I started to meet a few of the relatives. And we got together privately in someone's home. And we had a meeting. And it was agreed that I would go to the head office with another relative and we would take all the concerns to the head office, to the area manager. Now, the area manager was the sister of the chief executive of that company. So I thought, this is really good. And the chief executive was also a doctor. So I thought, this is really great. And I was there with this other relative, and there was the area manager and another manager. And we gave her the list of all the complaints. They had everything. And of the other people. So it wasn't just two relatives saying, this isn't right. And we made the list of the bells, the weights, the lack of equipment. The food at that time was terrible. And we said it all. I received a letter then from the company saying, when there are a certain amount of complaints, we put in an independent inspector and she will come and visit you at your home and you will talk to her about what was going on. She did indeed come here and she was shocked at what I was saying. And at that time, I said she hadn't been put to bed. At that time, she'd only not been put to bed once. And this inspector said, it shouldn't have happened just once. She said, this is very worrying. And of course, she said, you will get my full report in a few weeks' time. I'm seeing other relatives, residents, and I'm interviewing the staff. Well, we never had her report, but the other relative and myself were called in to the office with the manager, the matron, and we were told that a new area manager was taking over and that a different way of running the home would be put in place. And that was the end of that. We had to give them 3 months for things to be put right. Well, we accepted that. And during that 3 months, 3 relatives who continuously complained about various things, that the drugs weren't right, that a catheter had been wrongly used, all these things, those 3 relatives were told that they must remove their relatives from the home. A letter was sent to me by mistake, and I saw this letter. By this time my friend was desperately ill, and I think they thought she was about to die, and they couldn't possibly send me a letter saying, "Get her out of here." Well, she survived for some months. And finally, she started hemorrhaging. And I remember going there, and they said that they'd called an ambulance, and we waited for a long, long time, a few hours for the ambulance to come, and she was to be admitted into hospital. And my friend was hemorrhaging badly. And the matron came in and was very nice, inquiring, and the manager came and said to the matron, "If you want a lift home, you better come now." And I was left with my friend, an agency nurse then running the entire floor, seeing to everything, while I had to wait with my friend for the ambulance. When I complained about that to the new area manager, I was told that if I didn't like the care she was receiving, then I must look elsewhere. Incidentally, I had been looking elsewhere for about 9 months for another home, and there simply wasn't another home in the area where they would take her because, of course, they were full. You see, there's a shortage of beds, and there's a shortage of inappropriate care for people as ill as that. And it was only after my friend died that I and a few others went to our local MP and told him everything, absolutely everything. And we also told the local visiting priest. They were wonderful, and they arranged a public meeting where anybody could go and raise their concerns, and they also invited the company. They invited the chief executive, they invited the manager, the matron, and also the health authority. Only the health authority accepted, and yet they let residents be brought in wheelchairs to hear what we were about to say. And some of it was very upsetting, and it upset those residents. Why residents were brought to a public meeting to hear about the home they were in is actually beyond belief. That's how much they cared. What was funny, some of those residents actually got up and complained themselves. So then the health authority agreed that there could be an independent inspector to come and look at the home matter, see us and visit the home and interview everybody. And this took 3 months. I must add here that I had actually spoken to the inspector, the regional health inspector, about what was going on, and she had said, "Oh, it's a private home, they can do what they like." And also they had forbidden someone to visit her aunt because she had complained, and they said either your aunt is taken out or you don't visit and you stop complaining. So for months this poor woman wasn't visited. Now that upset the people at the home as well, and other people were beginning to be frightened. There was bullying and there was intimidation. Finally we got the independent inspector's report. Everything was done to prevent that report being published. She's actually told me that she suffered from aggressive behaviour. Our MP was threatened by the company. Our priest was threatened by the company. Everything was done to prevent the evidence being heard. And here we are, 6 years later, a group of relatives, 12 of us at least, who are at last going to have the evidence heard at the Nursing and Midwifery Council.